Coming up on this episode, Malmö and Copenhagen gear up for the Øresund Bridge derby, B67 retain their Greenlandic crown on home turf in Nuuk, and a fourth-tier team make Australian Cup history. Hello, and welcome to The Sweeper, the World Football podcast made in association with FIFA Plus. I'm Lee Wingate.
And I'm Paul Watson.
And we're back from our short but sweet summer break and raring to go for the 2025 to 26 season. I must admit, Paul, while I was on holiday, it felt weird not to sit in front of my laptop and chat away to you about San Marino and the like. What was your holiday like? Were you able to switch off from the football a bit?
Well, we went to Lincoln, the exotic Lincoln, on our break, which was lovely, really nice part of the country. But the weird thing is everyone's assuming that I go on these exotic trips. Like, you know, everyone's like, do you go to Greenland this year? And they're like, where do you go with your family? Is it, you know, off to Kiribati, Tuvalu? And I'm like, Lincoln. But it was really nice. It was really nice to switch off a little bit. That said, very much keeping a little sneaky eye on the European games going on and a little bit of the Greenlandic Championship. So you're never truly off in our world, are you, Lee?
No, it was the same for me while I was in Turkey, actually. Every Thursday evening, I had a firm eye on my phone as the results were coming in. I went to Istanbul for a wedding, actually, which was really nice, and it was sort of on the shores of the Bosphorus. So we were on the European side of the city, and then in the distance you can see the Anatolian, the Asian side of Istanbul. And I also did a couple of other really, really cool things in central Turkey and the Cappadocia region, which has become pretty Instagram famous now for its beautiful rocky terrain and sunrise hot air balloon rides. So I actually went up in a hot air balloon at dawn. That was breathtaking. And then my personal highlight of the trip was the camel ride. So we did a sunset camel ride, and everyone else in our tour group just had the smoothest ride into the sunset. And I was given the 6-year-old camel in training who wasn't really up for giving a human a ride that day. And I was pretty much holding on to her for dear life.
So they gave you the trialist A.
Yeah, she was not first team ready, but maybe if I go back in a couple of years, she might have broken through.
But only you, Lee, could end up in that situation.
It was a really good trip. It was just by the time I got off that camel, I was regretting it slightly. It was quite painful. But enough of our holidays. We're going to dive straight into the UEFA club competition qualifying rounds now, because plenty has been happening over the course of the last few weeks. And listeners, this would be a great time, if you're not already watching the video version of the podcast, to start doing so, because we've got lots of photos and videos that we're going to be putting on screen for this episode. You can watch the video version of this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, X, and Facebook. So do so if you want to see the images and videos we'll be throwing up. Now, we've divided this segment into 4 categories, Paul. We've got bridges and boats. We've got geography and geopolitics, luggage locations and let-offs, and minnows and makeovers. Which of those do you want to start with?
Ooh, maybe bridges and boats. I like the sound of that one.
Yeah, I think this is probably my favourite of the 4 categories, actually. We've got, in the next round of UEFA qualifying across the Champions League, Europa League and Conference League, 5 all Scandinavian ties. You've got Fredrikstad versus Midtjylland, Häcken versus Brann, Rosenborg against Hammarby, and Vikingur Reykjavik against Brøndby. The 5th of those, though, Malmö Copenhagen, is the one stealing the headlines at the moment. Why is that, Paul?
Is it the closest possible match? Because they're connected by a bridge, hence the bridge bit of this, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly how long it takes to get between the two, but it's something really short, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the shortest international away day ever. It has actually happened before in the 2019 to 20 UEFA Europa League, but this is the first time in the Champions League. 28 kilometres apart as the crow flies, connected by the Øresund Bridge, which we'll throw a picture up on screen now. It's this remarkable feat of engineering. It's sort of both a bridge and a tunnel that disappears into the North Sea. Incredible construction. And that is how Malmö and Copenhagen will be getting to their away day in the Champions League.
Fantastic. Well, we love a bridge. We've often talked about the Faroe Islands and their amazing undersea creations. But is this one? Has it got a bit of edge to it? This derby, like, is there a rivalry in this one?
It's interesting because we posted on Instagram about this Øresund Bridge derby, and there were very mixed reactions amongst the Malmö and Copenhagen fans about whether it is actually a derby or not. But to give you an indication of the physical proximity of the two clubs, for Malmö, Copenhagen is closer than all other 15 opponents in the Swedish Allsvenskan. And for Copenhagen, Malmö is closer than 9 of the 11 other clubs in the Danish Superligaen, all of the ones outside the capital. So if it isn't a derby, it really should be, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing, because there's always a bit of controversy about what makes a derby, isn't there? I've heard these debates. I suppose the only thing against it being a derby is if they just don't play very frequently. Maybe they've not created that sense of rivalry that comes, city rivals play historically over decades, and they're also maybe that kind of bragging rights feel of a city rivalry isn't quite there. But I would have thought this has all the hallmarks of a derby. And I mean, it's so evocative. It's going to be a brilliant occasion, isn't it? The fans all flooding over that bridge. It's just the kind of tie that you hope to see, really, in Europe.
For the nitpickers out there, it is important to specify that this is the shortest international away day. Of course, you have had clubs from the same city like Inter and AC play each other in the UEFA Champions League, but this is the shortest away day in a European club competition between two clubs from different countries. The Øresund Bridge pool was opened in 2000. Prior to that, the ferry was the prime mode of international transport between Denmark and Sweden, hence the Bridges and Boats title for this category. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to tell you my Scandinavian boat joke. Are you up for it?
I feel like there'll never be a better one, Lee.
There will never be a better time. So, here's my Scandinavian boat joke. Why do Nordic boats have barcodes on the side?
Oh, I don't know, Lee. Why do they?
So you can Scandinavian.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I mean, it's a joke, Lee.
I mean, I was determined to work this in there somehow, and I have managed that.
You started with the joke, and then you made the segment around it, right?
Yeah, basically. But what this did lead me to do is think about other bridge or boat-based away days in Europe, and there are some amazing examples of this, one of them happening as recently as last weekend. So I'll hand this over to you, Paul. Shall we go to Switzerland, North Macedonia, or Croatia first?
Ooh, can we start in Croatia?
Yes, we can, yeah. This is another bridge-based story. It is the Pelješac Bridge, which is the bridge that they've built around Bosnia. So Bosnia's got that narrow strip of coastline by Neum, and Croatia were basically fed up of having to go through an EU border twice to get back into the other side of Croatia because Dubrovnik is in an exclave to the south of the country. So they've built this Pelješac Bridge, and now Gosk Dubrovnik in the lower leagues of Croatia have to take this 2.5 kilometre bridge that goes out into the sea and back round into Croatia for every single away game that's outside of their exclave.
Wow, that's brilliant. I mean, it must save them a huge amount of time. The thought of what they were doing before, having to clear a proper like land border each time they played an away match. That's I wasn't aware of that. That's great.
That bridge was, I think, open after construction in 2022, and Croatia didn't join Schengen in 2023. So it wasn't like it was an EU non-EU border before the bridge was built, but they would have still had to clear a land border twice to get back into Croatia. So that's the one I picked out for Croatia. I think my favourite one in this segment is Switzerland, because just this weekend, 230 supporters of third tier Schaffhausen organised a fan boat to take them up the Rhine to their opening game of the season against Kreuzlingen on the shores of Lake Constance. This is the very pitch that Tom and I went to just a few months ago, where we played football against the teenagers on the beautiful shores of Lake Constance. And what I loved about this story is no sooner had I posted it on X, it was immediately picked up and shared by a Schaffhausen fan. And I love the fact that the sweeper has reached this kind of critical mass now that we can post a story about a third-tier Swiss team and it's immediately picked up by the fan base.
That's really lovely. Yeah, like you say, that kind of thing really, really makes you feel like the pod's developing a bit of a listenership, and it's lovely. It also does mean that if we ever make any mild inaccuracy, someone will be on you right away. Even when it's somewhere quite obscure, someone will get onto you immediately and say, actually, I live next door to the pitch, and you'll find...
Yeah. Well, we actually had that for this story, because I originally put in my tweet that they went down the Rhine, and somebody was like, no, they went up the Rhine. I was like, okay.
How could you live?
Yeah, shocking, huh? But yeah, this seemed like a great away day for the Schaffhausen fans. They were having, drinks and singing on the ferry on the way down. Their team was 2-0 down in the 90th minute, and they came away with a 2-2 draw. But I think my very favourite element of this story was that Kreuzlingen, who'd just been promoted from the 4th to the 3rd tier, managed to get a draw in their first game in the division, despite having 6 players who were missing at a wedding.
See, this made me realise, surely footballers don't just get married during the season and their players miss games, right? Because I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So do footballers, or maybe they just get married midweek, that's bizarre. You can't just lose 6 players to a wedding.
Yeah, and they still managed to get a draw, so pretty good going, really. The last one, North Macedonia. We have shared this on Twitter before. This is Tikvesh, who could not fit enough away fans into the tiny away end at Struga, which is on the shores of the beautiful Lake Ohrid in North Macedonia. And so what they decided to do was hire 2 boats, let off flares, and watch the game from the lake.
Yeah, I remember that. That was one of the great stories, isn't it? It reminded me. I think there are some baseball stadiums where there's water like back behind them, and sometimes the ball comes out the stadium like a home run, and people go in their boats to try and get the baseballs. Which I always love boat related stories.
Yeah, I think they were behind one of the stands actually, so I'm not sure how much of the game they actually saw. But they did.
Yeah,
make a
I wouldn't have thought. I mean, you wouldn't imagine they would have a good view, would you? Like in a boat, you're unlikely to have a brilliant view. But I guess it's to make their presence felt. The fans maybe could be heard in the stadium, which gives the players a boost, I suppose.
Should we hop on to our next category, which is geography and geopolitics? And I think one of the stories of the qualification rounds for me so far is Kairat Almaty of Kazakhstan. They came from 2 goals down to beat Kups of Finland in the UEFA Champions League second qualifying round. They're now up against Slovan Bratislava in the 3rd qualifying round. And if they qualified, Paul, they would become the easternmost club to ever play in the group or league phase of the UEFA Champions League. Almaty is 4,500 kilometres from Central Europe, and so far east that it's further east than the westernmost point of China.
Wow, that is crazy, isn't
Yeah.
it? That's absolutely crazy. I remember there was that story, I don't know if it was Almaty specifically, but there's a story about the Chelsea or someone like that were playing in that region, and there was a Mongolian fan club of Chelsea or Man United, whoever it was, who came to the match, and they'd travelled less distance considerably than the fans coming actually from England. And they were like, we just sort of hopped over from Mongolia. And you think, wow, the geography of European football is just crazy, isn't it?
Kairat Almaty have been the standout of the Kazakh football clubs in the European qualifying rounds this summer, but they haven't been the only one. Another Kazakh club that's been in action is Aktobe, who faced Legia Warsaw in the Europa League first qualifying round. Why did this tie make headlines, Paul?
Well, was it around a player who didn't take part in the tie for quite an unusual reason?
Yeah, it's Legia's Belarusian forward, Ilya Shkurin, who is an open critic of the Lukashenko regime in Belarus. He opted not to travel to Kazakhstan because he feared Belarus would either exert pressure on the local authorities, deny him entry, or detain him.
God, that's pretty sobering, isn't it? And I mean, to some ears, that might sound kind of paranoid and a bit crazy, but actually there is a real reason for him to be scared, isn't there, I think?
I mean, exactly. There's precedent for this. In 2021, there was a dissident journalist by the name of Roman Protasevich who was on board a commercial flight, a Ryanair flight, from Athens to Vilnius, and it was forcibly redirected to Minsk when it was over Belarusian airspace under the false pretext of a bomb threat. But actually, they just wanted to arrest and detain Protasevich. So anyone thinking here Ilya Shkurin is maybe going a little bit too far, I think he's, being safe over sorry is the right call here.
Yeah, it's very, very scary situation, and you've got to have a lot of respect for him for using his platform and being outspoken about that, because that is a tough choice to make and a very brave one.
Around 8,000 kilometers west of Kazakhstan, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean pool, is one of our favourite stopping points in European football. It is, of course, Santa Clara, the club from the Azorian Islands, who pulled off a pretty spectacular, can we say spectacular, comeback in the UEFA Conference League second qualifying round?
Yeah, well, it was a very good comeback, certainly. They were behind against Croatians Varaždin from the first leg, and they overturned that and got through. They're now through to face Larn in the UEFA Conference League third qualifying round, and it's a pretty huge chance for them to reach that group or league phase, and in doing so, create some enormous away days for probably some slightly frustrated clubs.
Yeah, I mean, if those Kazakh clubs get through, and say if Almaty were to play against Santa Clara, I think that would be just shy of 9,000 kilometers as an away day. And that is because, of course, Santa Clara would be the westernmost club ever to qualify for the group or league phase of a European competition if they get through. They're up against, as you say, Larn of Northern Ireland. Do you think they can do it?
I'd say they're probably the favourites. Larn, this is no disrespect to Larn. Larn have done really well to get to this point. They squeezed past Pristina in Kosovo on penalties, and that was a really gutsy effort from them. But you'd think, given the respective strengths of the two leagues, you would predict the Portuguese side would be the favourites.
We actually got, when we posted a thread about Santa Clara on Twitter and Instagram recently, we got a great message with a piece of trivia from Alex Quiros. He's a Portuguese listener. He messaged to tell us that the Santa Clara reserves, up until last season, used to play even further west than the senior team because they couldn't agree a deal with the local authorities to use the pitch on São Miguel Island, which is where the senior team play. So they had to fly 150 kilometres further west into the Atlantic to play on the neighbouring island of Terceira.
That's great. So as if it wasn't hard enough to get there.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, Santa Clara are not the westernmost club in Europe. It is, in fact, their reserves, or it was until last season anyway. Our third category on the UEFA club competition qualifying rounds is luggage, locations and let-offs. Paul, what happened to Penybont on their recent trip to face Kauno Žalgiris of Lithuania?
Pretty much what's happened to all of us at one point, usually flying on a budget airline. Their bags were lost, but most of us don't have a UEFA Conference League tie looming, and that caused them a fair bit of stress, I think, because there were pictures circulating of the Welsh side Penybont in Vilnius going to the equivalent of Sports Direct and just having to buy everything, like all the way through from football boots, which they were going to kind of try and wear in time for the match, to underwear. They put this huge splurge on a credit card effectively. Luckily, their stuff all arrived the next day on match day, so they did actually have their kit. Otherwise, I suppose they would have had to borrow some of the Kauno Žalgiris kits for their own for that match, which would have been something you don't expect to see in Europe, really.
No, but I wonder if part of them will be thinking, wish we hadn't spent that €3,300 on replacement gear, because when you're reunited with your luggage and you've spent €3,300 on something you now don't need just hours earlier, I wonder if there'll be mixed feelings about that, or they were just relieved to get it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not an inconsiderable sum of money, and I'm imagining there's no box to tick on the airline's forms where it's like refund potential UEFA Conference League costs. Yeah, it is a shame that they had to spend that money. And to make matters worse, they were beaten fairly convincingly. I think that was 3-0 in Lithuania. Couldn't reverse that in the home leg, so they are out as well. So it's not like it's a fun story they can tell themselves when they get through to the next round.
On to the next home nation in this segment, and that is Northern Ireland. Their champions Linfield played against the Republic of Ireland's champions Shelbourne in the UEFA Champions League first qualifying round. We talked a little bit about this tie on the last episode, didn't we? Well, now it's been played. Shelbourne came out with a 2-1 aggregate win. In a tie which was really quite feisty, Linfield were fined €12,000 for racist and or discriminatory behaviour by their supporters. But that, Paul, is not why we're bringing them up on this episode. The reason for this tie's inclusion is for a fantastic message we've received from a Sweeper listener, Ryan McDyer, on Twitter, who said, "Sweeperpod, I have a very stupid question. Is the Shelbourne versus Linfield game the easiest directions between grounds possible in a European tie? If you plug Windsor Park to Tolka Park onto Google Maps, there are only 4 turns in total." I mean, have we ever received a more Sweeper message than that?
No, we haven't. It's absolute genius. And what an amazing claim, because I cannot think of anywhere that can match that. I tried. I haven't researched.
Yeah,
you will have, Lee. You will have.
I tried. I did. I tried. I looked at ties that have either taken place or could conceivably take place. So I looked at Malmö FC Copenhagen, which we talked about at the top of the show. I looked at Bayern Munich Salzburg, Rapid Vienna Slovan Bratislava as the 2 closest European capitals. I looked at Sturm Graz, Mura, Rakov against Jelena, and all of them were simple journeys, but they required at least 5 to 7 turns. So we throw the challenge over to you, listeners. Can you find 2 European opponents that could conceivably face each other with 4 turns or fewer on the Google Maps directions?
I bet they will as well.
I bet
Our
someone
listeners are
will.
so good at this.
Yeah. We've got some real geography whizzes. So you know who to contact. If you can manage to do that, sweeperpod@gmail.com. But last up in this segment, Paul, Hungary. We've had a Kosovan Graham Poll, haven't we?
Oh, we have. And this was a chaotic end to this match. So this is the UEFA Conference League second qualifying round between Etogor of Hungary and Punic of Armenia. Now, this was a great tie. Absolute thrilling tie. It ended up being 4-3 to Győr. And the goal was scored by Croatian defender Daniel Štefali. Now, he was booked because he took his shirt off to celebrate. He then, in a fracas, managed to kick an opponent in the face. So that would have got him another yellow card. But he wasn't shown it because the referee had mistaken him, the number 25, for the number 23 and gave the card instead to Dejan Boldor, his teammate. So this was obviously going to bring us on to, when has this happened before, that a player has been booked twice and not sent off. And sadly, that always makes us think of Graham Poll.
Yeah, who I believe also made the same mistake with another Croatian player, right? It was at the 2006 World Cup, and I believe it wasn't until he showed Josip Simjanic his 3rd yellow card that he sent him off. I think that was it.
Yeah, it is. And it's sad, isn't it? Because Graham Poll is such a legendary referee. You know, he was the guy you always thought of when you thought of like good, solid English referee of a certain era. Graham Poll's your guy. And yet now, even I, someone who's seen Poll referee many games, you always think about those 3 yellow cards. And it just shows how hard refereeing is, isn't it? Because same on this one, like it's a completely understandable mistake to make, especially when shirts are being taken on and off and when you've got 25 and 23. It's
kind of amazing now, though, that in this VAR era, that kind of stuff can happen, because you would have thought that in the UEFA Conference League there'd be VAR and that would be able to help him, but I'm not sure at which stage of the competition it comes into force.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is exactly the kind of thing it can intervene in, I guess. Once you've shown the yellow card to someone, are you allowed to rescind it with a VAR? I don't even know. I just know he got into a whole mess. And the poor referee, I imagine, is now waiting for a demotion out of European football.
Final category in this segment, Paul, is minnows and makeovers. Now, the minnows specifically refers to the 2 second division clubs taking part in the Conference League qualifying rounds. They are, of course, FC Vaduz of Liechtenstein and Speri of Georgia. How did they get on in the last round?
Very mixed fortunes here. So FC Vaduz of Liechtenstein are through. They came back from a deficit against Dungannon Swifts of Northern Ireland and overturned that to win on aggregate. They were helped by the fact Dungannon Swifts had a player sent off quite early in the second leg, but to take nothing away from them, that's a pretty great achievement for the Liechtenstein side. They will have a very tough time against Alkmaar in the next round. I think that might prove to be a little bit too much for them.
Yeah, I would have to concur. They are, however, still in with a chance of becoming the first second division side to reach the group or league phase of a European club competition twice, because of course they did that a few years ago as well. And in that season, they beat Rapid Vienna and Konyaspor in the qualifying rounds. So never say never. They might do it. What about Speri of Georgia?
Yeah, we can say never for them. The bodyguards, as we call them, because they are the team of the State Protection Service in Georgia. They needed someone to protect them, I think, against Austria Vienna. They lost 7-0 on aggregate. It was a pretty one-sided affair, all in all. And as much as we love second-tier participants in European competitions, as we've mentioned, they're not the cuddliest of entrants, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't actually allow any fans to watch this game, which is mental for a home European debut. I think the game was taking place at an alternative, much smaller stadium, and so they released a statement saying that there was only enough space for the academy team, family and friends, so tickets wouldn't be issued. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, and I imagine that didn't go down too well with the Austria Vienna fans, because you don't generally expect a team to voluntarily put a ban on away fans. It seems a very dubious technique. I wonder if they were trying to reduce the crowd to keep the atmosphere from being a factor, because we've mentioned before they don't appear to have any real support, Speri, that we know of, not anything meaningful, whereas I imagine Austria Vienna very much do. So I wonder if it was an attempt to limit the impact of a sort of passionate away support. In any case, as we said, it did not work.
Yeah, their brief European run is over. There was to be no Speri Tale run this summer.
Oh, come on.
Now, we're going to conclude this segment, Paul, with makeovers. The UEFA Women's Football tournaments have really undergone a makeover this summer. The UEFA Women's Champions League has had a revamp. It's transformed from a group phase to a league phase, like the men's tournament, but with 18 teams. And interestingly for us, the qualifying rounds have been expanded too. So you've got 74 participating clubs from 50 national associations, among them 10 debutants. And I think the one that I want to give a real mention to here is Athlone Town from the Republic of Ireland, making their European debut only 5 years after founding their women's team. They beat Cardiff City of Wales 3-0 and Agram of Croatia 4-0. And this is, I mean, these qualifying rounds, they're kind of like the preliminary round of the Champions League used to be. You basically get a series of mini tournaments. One of the teams is chosen as a designated host. They play a semi-final and a final, and the winner goes through to the next round, which I think is quite a nice idea. And that is how Athlone Town have made it through to the second Champions League qualifying round at the end of August.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations to them. I think there is a really interesting snapshot here as well into the relative resources that are put towards these teams compared to men's teams at this phase of the competition, right? So I'm imagining that's part of the reason why it's organised this way, is to stop teams having to travel as much because the finances aren't there. But I think there are stories that I've seen, all over the place of the way that these women's teams have to travel, and it's just so hard compared to the equivalent in the men's game, right? So amazing effort from Athlone Town, and really from everyone just competing in that tournament without any of the luxuries that we take for granted when you're in European competition.
I think a positive side effect of that from a sporting perspective, though, is that both in the UEFA Women's Champions League and also in the newly launched a Women's Europa Cup, which is going to be like the Women's Europa League, which is coming into being this season, you do have more jeopardy as a result, because in that 16-team Women's Europa Cup, it is like the old UEFA Cup. It's knockout ties all the way. And I think I like that more than leagues and groups, really. I mean, I have been a fan of the league phases, but by the same token, nothing says jeopardy like knockouts all the way. So I quite like it.
Yeah, and as you say, it throws back to that kind of retro feeling of old school European ties that we grew up with, where it was just two legs, you lose, you're out. And there is something a bit more purist about that, for sure.
Looking at all of the teams that are involved in the Women's Champions League and Europa Cup this summer, one of them really stood out to me, Paul. We're going to finish the segment with this. Why is the young boys women's team not called young girls? Surely that would make sense. Young boys play under the name young boys even in women's tournaments.
I wonder if there's a technicality where you have to have the same name as, you know, if they're part of the group that is called young boys. Maybe they literally have to be called it. I don't know. It's a very good point. It's slightly odd, isn't it?
They're called Young Boys Frauen, so Young Boys Women, but they are among the participants that will be entering the fray in the second qualifying round of the Champions League at the end of the month, along with SFK 2000 of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who we talked about last time, the team that hold the Guinness World Record for most consecutive league titles at 23. I'm sure we will be touching back on those competitions as they progress, especially the new Women's Europa Cup. But for now, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to round up the best of our remaining stories from the likes of Greenland, Colombia, and Japan. Welcome back to part 2 of The Sweeper, in which we'll be rounding up the best domestic cup stories from Australia, Japan, Estonia, and beyond. But first up, it's time to head to Greenland, where the 2025 Football Championship concluded last week. Well, it both started and concluded last week, didn't it, Paul? Because it is famously the world's shortest football season, and the winners on home turf in Nuuk were
B67. The powerhouse of Greenlandic football. They are very much the expected winners, but they had a real fight of it this time. It looked for a while like it might not be their year.
Yeah, did you watch the final? Because it was live streamed on YouTube.
Yeah, I did. I mean, they were very dominant, I thought, in the final. They seemed like they were doing everything but scoring for a long period. But the team that they were playing in the final, what was really interesting, I think, was that was the team that had beaten them unexpectedly in the group stage. That's IT79. So for a while, I did wonder if this call it a stranglehold. It is a stranglehold, really, on Greenlandic football was going to come to an end.
Yeah, it was an all Nuuk sort of tie, wasn't it, in the final between two capital clubs. IT79 went 1-0 up through a headed goal in the first half. Somebody pointed out that they then conceded in the 79th minute as they went on to lose 2-1. They'll probably be quite gutted, though, because that would have only been their second ever title. Yeah,
so IT79 are nicknamed the Students. That's their nickname. I don't know if they are any more a student team. I don't think it's necessarily the case, but they've always been second fiddle in Nuuk, really, as long as I remember, to B67. B67 had this title that was ever so slightly disparaging, that they were known as a Danish club by some people. And I think that's, again, to do with the roots of the club, that maybe they had more investment, more money coming in from Denmark. They've certainly had quite good sponsors. I think they were sponsored by Carlsberg at one point. But yeah, there was a real sense of it being a sort of an underdog story if IT79 could win it. And yeah, they will be devastated, because that's about as close as it's come to B67 not winning a title for a little while.
One of our podcast patrons, Aidan, who's from Australia, actually attended the tournament, and he called me up last night to tell me a little bit about his experiences in Nuuk. And one of the things that I didn't know that I really took away from this final is that there were two brothers on opposite sides. You had Soren Kreutzmann, who Aidan has nicknamed the Greenlandic Ronaldinho, playing for B67. And then on the other side, you had his brother, I think Jürgen Kreutzmann, who was playing for IT79. So there was an all-brother duel. And the way that this tournament was set out as well was you had 3 days of group games, then a rest day, and then the semi-finals and final after that. And apparently on the rest day, Aidan went to Søren Kreutzmann, the B67 player's hair salon, and had a haircut because he's a barber. So he took a break in the middle of the tournament to cut hair again.
There's not often you can hear that, is there? That you went to the Ronaldinho of a country and got a haircut from them. That is fantastic. There were a few players with interesting stories in the tournament, though, weren't there? Like, at least there was another one that I remember hearing about, a player for G44, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, are you referring to the player, the Brazilian player, or the rock star player coach here?
More the rock star, but you're right. They did also have, I think, the first non-Greenlandic, Danish, or Faroese player to play at a Greenlandic championship, who was Ricardo Carvalho.
Not that one, right?
Not that one.
Yeah.
No, not that one, I don't think. Who they had actually managed to sign from an Icelandic club, which is, I think, pretty unheard of. But
on loan, right? And I found that interesting because it's only a week-long tournament. So is this the shortest loan in football history for 1 week? I mean, can you call it a loan? Is it just a business trip if it's just 1 week long?
You're right. It's a very short loan. It could be one of the quickest loans to win a title and just come back again, isn't it? But it wasn't to be for G44. But yeah, this was interesting to me because Brazilian players are all over the world. It's probably one of the nations that exports the most footballers for obvious reasons. And I've seen players in the Faroe Islands from Brazil, and you always think, God, that's a big change, isn't it? But Greenland seemed to be a bit of a final frontier for foreign players. I'd love to know what the deal was. Like, was he getting a sack full of money and or elk meat, or like what would lure him, or is he someone like us who just thought this would be a really cool thing to do? I'd probably more the latter, I think.
His manager at G44 for that week-long tournament is a famous singer-songwriter. His name is Nakan Gwak Zeeb. He is the front man of one of Greenland's most popular bands called Tullarit. And he is both the front man of a band and also the player coach of G44.
It's like superstar on both levels, isn't it? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, footballer or rock star? I don't know, but yeah, it's amazing, these small communities where you can be like one of the best musicians in a community and also one of the best footballers. It feels a bit unfair, doesn't it?
Wasn't Slaven Bilic also a rock star in addition to being a footballer? And he's also, isn't he a qualified lawyer as well?
Oh, I didn't know about the lawyer bit, but yeah, he was. I forgot about him. And to a lesser extent, and I don't know if he was any good, but didn't Alexi Lalas, the US international, didn't he always have like a guitar with him? He might just be that annoying guitarist at a party. That probably more suits my vision of Alexi Lalas. But I don't know if he actually... I have a feeling he might have released an album too, but I'm sure we'll be called up on that if he didn't.
Among the withdrawals for this tournament, because every year you get withdrawals very late on, don't you? And last year I think it was because teams wanted to go reindeer hunting. This year we did have 2 withdrawals. They were N48 and Upernavik, and I'd never heard of Upernavik before, and a brief internet search revealed that it is one of the most northerly inhabited settlements in the world. Now, you and I have talked on this podcast about Tromsø being the northernmost professional team. This is just, one of the most northerly inhabited places on the planet. It's 800 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. And when I spoke to Aidan on the phone, he'd just finished a 45-hour ferry journey from Nuuk, the capital, up the coast to Disco Bay, where last year's tournament took place. Now, Upernavik is much further north than that. So I'd imagine if those players had made that journey, it would have been like 4 days on the ferry or something like that. Or they would have had to pay for a flight, which was €2,000 return from Upernavik to Nuuk. And I think it was actually the finances and the logistics that led to their withdrawal. But the thing that I don't get about this is surely you would know this before the last minute. And every year the withdrawals in Greenland seem to be at the last minute. Wouldn't they know that the flights are going to be insanely expensive?
Yeah, I wonder if they live in hope more than expectations. So, I mean, we talk about this being the shortest season. It's a very good kind of tagline. And I think it is true in terms of like a national season. It is a very short season. It's a week long. But there is obviously the regional qualifiers that allow these teams to qualify. So what I think maybe happens is they play these regional qualifiers, which are just like regional championships, and everyone wants to play in them. And then whoever qualifies by winning those to be part of the national tournament, they probably have this moment where they think, you know what, maybe this year we'll raise the money, and they go out and try and get it. And then as it gets closer to the date, it starts to dawn on them that either they can't raise the flight prices, which I think is a big part of it. Also, people just can't take time off either work or hunting for their families, or, you know, whatever it is that they're doing. So I wonder if it's more of a gradual thing, that each year there's a cutoff point where they suddenly think, you know what, it's not going to happen. But it's not unthinkable that they could do it, but it's just beyond their means each time.
A big thanks to Aidan, anyway, for giving us all of that brilliant information on the tournament. You can follow his new Instagram account at Bullpackers. That's Bullpackers on Instagram. But for now, we're going to hop on to some amazing domestic cup sets and stories, starting in Australia, Paul, where the last 32 of the Australian Cup has thrown up some incredible narratives. I think chief among them is 4th Division Nunawading City winning 9-0 away to second-tier Darwin Olympic. This was a record scoreline in the history of the Australian Cup by a 4th Division team.
Yeah, that didn't seem to make any sense at all, did it? If they'd lost 9-0, you wouldn't necessarily have blinked at it, you know, a lower league team being out of their depth. But no, to win that game 9-0. They seem like quite a special club. I don't know much about them. I know they have a mural of Ange, Big Ange, as he's called there, Postecoglou, on the wall alongside, I think, is it Cruyff and someone else, like some other very famous managers. So they're sort of, I think their whole ethos is very much Ange's ethos of the way they play, and it's quite a strong philosophy that the club has adopted. You know, it's a very strong guiding light as to how they produce players, and it seems to be really working for them. That's all I can say, really, from my external perspective.
For as good as they were, Darwin Olympic were absolutely atrocious. That's one of the worst performances I've seen for a long time. They were slow into the challenges. They were repeatedly getting caught out by through balls. They just gave a terrible account of themselves. But of course, we do have to give credit to Nunawading City, because you don't win 9-0 as a 4th Division team every week. And that happened at the same time that 2 other clubs from Melbourne, that's A-League winners Melbourne City and also Melbourne Victory, were both dumped out by lower league clubs. This seems to be a competition where lower league clubs absolutely flourish, because for the 3rd year in a row, 10 of the last 16 in the tournament are from outside the A-League.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's a great competition. I didn't know much about it, but again, it's one of these competitions where everyone enters. It's huge. You have, like, I can't remember how many it is, but it's somewhere in the 400s of clubs that enter each year. And yeah, absolutely love a tournament like this where underdogs can triumph.
A brief shout out also to second-tier Peninsula Power, who tried to shrink the size of their pitch by 3.5 metres to give themselves a better chance against Western Sydney Wanderers. Did you see that?
I did, and they still lost, didn't they?
Yeah, they still lost 3-0.
Yeah, brilliant. And there was a lovely story there where their goalkeeper saved a penalty from a Bulgarian international, and then someone had tweeted saying, I bet he won't be at work tomorrow. And the goalkeeper had replied to the tweet saying, yeah, sadly I am. That kind of stuff I always love in that kind of giant killing world. It's brilliant.
Do you know what I also found interesting about the Australian Cup? It's the fact that in the last 32, there were 4 clubs with Croatian roots. You had Adelaide Croatia Rovers, Gold Coast Knights, Canberra Croatia, and Sydney United. Now, perhaps that's not that surprising when you consider there are 43,000 Australian residents who were born in Croatia and 165,000 with Croatian roots. That's 0.6% of the population. But still, to have 4 teams in the last 32 with like a Croatian migrant background is quite interesting, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. And I mean, in the history of the Australian national team, there have been some pretty spectacular players with Croatian lineage there. So I guess it shouldn't be that big a surprise. But yeah, there are even some feisty derbies, aren't there, between different Croatian teams in the tournament, which, again, it's amazing.
I think last year they had Serbian and Macedonian teams that did quite well as well. I think there's a big sort of migration pattern from the Balkans to Australia, and lots of those teams seem to be doing pretty well. Another country which produced an amazing cup set, or series thereof, is Japan. In the Emperor's Cup, there is one club every year that is the amateur designated team. And what that is it's an amateur team that bypasses all of the prefectural qualification rounds. Now, as the winners of the 2024 All-Japan University Football Championship, that amateur designated team this year is Toyo University. They play in the Kanto University League, and they have got to the fourth round of the Japanese Cup, beating two J-League sides in the last two rounds. That is Kashiwa Reysol and Albirex Niigata, to set up a tie against Vissel Kobe, which takes place on Wednesday, the day this podcast goes out. Just to repeat that is insane. A university team beating two top-flight teams in the Cup.
Yeah, they're not like when I was a student. I think they've probably taken a bit better care of themselves.
I mean, just to show how obscure this team is, if you go onto the Wikipedia page for the 2025 Emperor's Cup and you click on their name, it doesn't take you to the football club, it takes you to the educational institution they represent. There just isn't a Wikipedia page for the football club. It's incredible.
It's an astonishing effort, isn't it? It was a really astonishing effort. I feel like there was another university team in Japan that we spoke about once who went on a kind of tremendous run in this competition, who got slightly famed for it, but I'd have to go back for our past pods. I feel like there is a history of university clubs in Japan being quite successful.
Yeah, I think the coach of Makeda Zelvia, who almost won the J-League as a promoted club, had previously been a coach of a university team for 28 years, and they'd taken a real gamble on him by appointing him in the J-League. But I can't remember any other Emperor's Cup university-related stories apart from that. We'll have to dig into the Sweeper archives. But let's keep the ball rolling on our cup dates from around the world. What happened in Norway that is of interest at the moment?
Well, in Norway, second-tier side Lillestrøm have had an incredible run. They're in the final of the 2025 Norwegian Cup. They're playing against Sarpsborg from the Eliteserien, so they'll be outsiders in that. But perhaps what's most interesting from our perspective about it is they seem to be going back in time, because their next cup tie is, in fact, against 4th division side Lørenskog in the first round of this year's Norwegian Cup. So if that sounds confusing, it kind of is. It's partly the way I've delivered it. It's partly because it's quite a confusing situation. They've moved the competition schedule, so they've shifted from a calendar year format to autumn to spring. So this year's tournament is getting underway before last year's competition's final has taken place.
Yeah, I think there's like a 4-month wait now until the 2025 final, isn't there? So
yeah.
This tie is, I think, mid-August, this first round tie of the next season. And that final against Sarpsborg is in December.
Yeah, so it's a really odd situation, isn't it, where it does feel like time has glitched. And a really interesting side note to this that we were told by Twitter user Martin Bjerka is that this means that Lillestrøm aren't guaranteed European football if they win the competition, right? Because they'll have to have a playoff against the 2025-26 winners, because they will now exist before there's another European spot to give. So that is a anomaly, isn't it? That's a really strange situation.
Yeah, so usually the Norwegian Cup winners would get an automatic place, but now because there'll be 2 Cup winners before the next European season, they'll have to play each other, or Lillestrøm win both tournaments.
Yeah, right. I mean, that must make them one of the unluckiest teams ever, really, in that one sense. If they don't get that spot, having won the cup fair and square, that would be brutal. And us one of the unluckiest podcasts, because
we love a second tier team in Europe, and imagine being denied that in such a cruel way.
Yeah, has anyone thought of us? Has anyone thought of the Sweeper in this?
I don't think they have, to be honest, Paul. But you know what's quite interesting is this change seems to be getting a lot of flack online. Norwegians are saying it's not broke, don't fix it. Why do we need to shift our rhythm? And I also think it's slightly strange, because if you have the league season fitting in with the calendar year, and then you shift the cup competition to an autumn to spring format. Now the league and the cup are out of sync with each other. It's a bizarre change, isn't it?
I cannot see why it is. I'm sure there's a reason, right? But I'm struggling to see what advantage is gained from this. I can only see this causing short-term chaos, and I'm not quite sure what the long-term payoff is, really.
Well, let's see if Lillestrøm are knocked out of the cup before they win last season's one. That would be quite some story, wouldn't it? But we're going to move on next to Estonia, where there have been some great stories in the last 64 of the Estonian Cup. Top flight Haapsalu played host to a lower league amateur team called FC TransferWise, who are sponsored by the fintech company Wise, formerly TransferWise. Now, TransferWise have had a soft spot in my heart for quite a while. But that's not even a phrase, is it? A soft spot in my heart. But they've had a place in my heart for a while. This is not an endorsed segment, but when I first moved to Austria, there was still I think the first time I transferred money, it wasn't a big amount of money, but I ended up having to pay a €20 transfer fee or something like that. It might have even been more. But now I use TransferWise, and it costs just a couple of euros. So when I saw that TransferWise actually have an Estonian team, I was like, well, they'll be my Estonian team now. But they lost 26-0 in this game in front of 78 spectators, which, as the Twitter account UEFA Obscura pointed out, that means they conceded precisely 1 goal for every 3 spectators in the crowd.
That is a record they need to cut. Basically, they can't keep doing that, because if the attendances start to go up, imagine 1,000 people through the gate, they're going to have a bad day. That is an amazing. Every aspect of that is amazing. I would have expected, from what you said about them, for them to be a club with quite a bit of money, maybe a club who do good business, but it doesn't sound that way.
No, it really doesn't at all. Also, they must be sick of the sight of Haapsalu, who also beat them 15-0 at the same stage of the competition last season. So that's 41 goals to none over 2 games.
Oh, that's a hard motivational speech to give as a coach, isn't it? When you're taking on a team that beat you 16-0 last time. Tricky.
And was that, Paul, the main headline of the last 64 in the Estonian Cup? I don't think so, because there was the Flora Tallinn derby, reserve derby, between the under-18s and the under-21s of Flora Tallinn. The under-21s won 12-1. We've talked quite a bit, I think even recently, about HJK Helsinki playing their own reserves in the Finnish Cup, but I have never heard of 2 reserve teams from the same club playing each other in a domestic cup.
No, that is really unique, isn't it? And interesting that the result was so emphatic. That is a big beating. Technically, everyone who played for the under-18s could also play for the under-21s.
Yeah.
So very split allegiances there then.
Yeah, I mean, just bizarre. But the Estonian Cup, we've talked about the Estonian Small Cup before, the sort of amateur tournament. But the actual Estonian Cup is providing plenty of headlines as well. But for now, we're going to finish today's episode by bringing you a story from Colombia. Well, it's a Colombian footballer who's playing in Bolivia. He is known as the Calendar Footballer. Paul, I'm going to leave his name over to you, but please tell us about the Calendar Footballer.
So Bolivia is great because it makes it very easy for you to know who the 2 best teams are, right? The 2 best teams at the top are the strongest and always ready. Obviously, right. And they are locked together on 34 points. But what wasn't so close was when the 2 teams met last, which was back in July last month. Always Ready won 7-2. Which is kind of a weird score in itself. But the thing that caught our eye was one of the goal scorers, this Colombian player you alluded to, who has one of the most unique names in all of football, because his parents opted to name him with the initials of every month of the year. So his name
in Spanish, right?
In Spanish, right? Which makes my life a lot harder, or maybe easier, which means his name is Efmamjjasond González. He generally is just called Jasond, which makes it a bit easier. But
Jason. Sounds like Jason.
Jason, right? Jason. But yeah, he has been nicknamed Calendario, like the calendar, which is a fantastic nickname, I've got to say.
Yeah. Also, he was asked, why are you named after the months of the year? And he just said, my parents love the months of the year. I was like, okay.
You can't love the months of the year.
Yeah.
It's like, love them. That's a nonsense reason. I wondered if they got mixed up and maybe they thought they were filling out one part of his birth certificate. Like,
that's amazing, isn't it? Do you think this is a weirder or a less weird name than our other South American name story we've talked about before? That's the Peruvian player Osama bin Laden, whose brother is called Saddam Hussein.
I know which one I'd be taking. If I could have either name, Lee, I think I'd be Yasond every day of the week. Yeah, no, Osama bin Laden is still, I think, the worst name in football. That poor Peruvian player. And the only consolation for him, as you say, is that his brother's called Saddam Hussein. And I think, is it true that his sister was called Georgia Bush? Or is that all just a kind of Wikipedia fantasy?
I think we read that his sister was called... So his dad wanted to have a third son and call him George Bush, but then it was a daughter. And so I'm not sure where we got the Georgia Bush thing. I think we need to verify that. But what a family dinner table that is.
What a family dinner table. Yeah, I wonder how many people get Bin Laden on the back of their shirts. Probably not many.
Yeah, probably not all that many. One thing that I also saw from this game, which Always Ready won 7-2 against the strongest, is that they scored 2 goals inside the first 6 minutes. So they really lived up to their name on that one, didn't they?
Oh, they must constantly live in fear of conceding in the opening minutes, right?
Yeah.
If you're their social media admin, you're going to have a bad day when that happens.
Yeah. I think that brings about a very comprehensive episode to a close. If you want to get more content from us, you can, of course, do that on Patreon, of course, at patreon.com/sweeperpod. Plenty of bonus episodes, regular written content, all sorts of stuff over there. And please do follow us on socials. It's pretty easy to remember. We're at sweeperpod everywhere. And at the moment, we're really trying to grow our Instagram. So do check us out on Instagram at sweeperpod. Please also leave us a review, just a rating out of 5 stars on your podcast app. Any other calls to action I've missed there, Paul?
No, I can't think of any, Lee. But I think that was a strong start to the season.
I think so too. Big thanks to Killian, who provided us the info about the Schaffhausen story, and Aidan for his info on the Greenlandic Football Championship. We'll catch you for another main pod in 2 weeks' time on Wednesday, the 20th of August.